The hidden reason you never get what you want and how to fix it. You think you know what you want: success, love, peace, control. But what if I told you most people spend their entire lives chasing things their soul never asked for? Carl Jung said. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is not a motivational video. It's a psychological awakening, a journey into the deepest layers of your mind to uncover why you don't really know what you want, why your shadow blocks it, and how to align with the hidden force that already knows your path. Because once your conscious and unconscious agree, you stop chasing, and life starts delivering. Part 1. The unconscious desire: why you don't really know what you want. Most people believe they know what they want: money, love, power, recognition, or peace. But if you look closely, you'll realize that what most people pursue is not truly theirs. It's a reflection of what society told them to want. They chase an image, the perfect life, the ideal relationship, the successful career, without realizing that this image is a projection of the collective unconscious. Carl Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In other words, your wants are rarely born from your conscious reasoning. They are born from the invisible forces of the psyche that live underneath your awareness. You might think you want a new job, a better partner, or more money, but what you're actually craving is recognition, safety, or the illusion of control, all of which are psychological compensations for what your unconscious feels is missing. 1. The ego's illusion of desire. Jung often spoke of the ego as the center of consciousness, but not the center of the whole personality. The ego believes it's in control, that it knows what it wants. Yet most of the time it's merely responding to outer expectations. You want what others seem to value, what gets praise, what feels right according to cultural conditioning. This is why you can achieve your goals and still feel deeply dissatisfied. The ego's desires are short-lived because they are external substitutes for inner hunger. They do not satisfy the soul, they merely distract it. From a Jungian view, every want that comes from the ego is transactional. If I get this, then I will finally feel complete. But the psyche doesn't work that way. What you desire most is not a thing, it's wholeness. You want to feel that you are enough, that your existence matters, that your life reflects something true about your essence. When your conscious desires are disconnected from your deeper self, life feels like chasing a mirage. The more you run, the further you get from what you're really seeking. Jung believed that the first task of any mature psyche is to recognize this split between what the ego wants and what the self, the deeper organizing principle of the psyche, is calling for. 2. The shadow's hidden influence. The moment you say, "I want this," the unconscious asks, why hidden behind every desire is a shadow motivation, something you may not want to admit. You might want success to prove your worth because deep down you feel inferior. You might crave love to fill the void of abandonment. You might pursue power to escape vulnerability. Jung called this process shadow projection, the way we unconsciously project rejected parts of ourselves into the world around us. You can't see your own shadow directly. You recognize it only in what you're drawn to or repelled by. This means your strongest desires often carry the voice of what's missing or wounded inside you. The shadow is not evil. It's simply everything you've denied. It's the child who learned that being loud, expressive, or needy was too much. It's the adult who compensates by pretending to be self-sufficient, stoic, or above it all. The shadow shapes your goals without your awareness convincing you that your longings are rational when they are really psychological compensations. So when you say, "I want to be successful," what you might actually mean is, "I want to be seen." When you say, "I want to find love," what you might mean is, "I want to feel safe." And when you say, "I want freedom," what you might mean is, "I want to stop running from myself." Understanding this distinction is crucial, because until you bring the shadow's voice into the light, your desires are not your own, they are your defenses dressed as dreams. 3. The collective unconscious and social programming. Jung's idea of the collective unconscious suggests that much of what we think is personal is actually archetypal, shaped by shared cultural patterns. For example, the archetype of the hero drives many men to chase career success at the cost of inner peace. The mother archetype pushes many women to sacrifice their individuality for care and belonging. These archetypes are ancient forces. They create myths, religions, and social roles. But when a person becomes unconsciously identified with them, their desires are no longer authentic. They become roles in a story that isn't theirs. Modern society amplifies this identification. Advertising, media, and social comparison exploit archetypal energy to manipulate desire. You are told that success equals worth, beauty equals love, and productivity equals value. As a result, your wants become rehearsed scripts rather than soul impulses. From a Jungian perspective, the goal is not to eliminate desire, but to differentiate, to discern which desires belong to your true self and which come from the collective hypnosis. This requires what Jung called withdrawal of projections, pulling your energy back from what the outer world tells you to pursue and turning inward to listen to what your own psyche is asking for. 4. Dreams, the unconscious language of desire. Jung considered dreams the royal road to the unconscious. What you cannot admit in waking life, your fears, your longing, your hidden drives will appear symbolically in dreams. For instance, a dream about searching for a key might symbolize your inner need to unlock suppressed emotions or new potentials. A dream of being chased may reveal your avoidance of inner truths. Even dreams about material success or love often carry deeper symbolic meanings. The unconscious doesn't speak in literal terms, it uses images and metaphors. When you pay attention to dreams, you begin to see that what you want may not be what your soul truly needs. A man who dreams of climbing a mountain may think he wants achievement, but the psyche may actually be asking for transcendence, to rise above limited identity. A woman who dreams of a locked door may believe she wants freedom, but her soul may be calling her to confront fear and open a new level of consciousness. Listening to dreams transforms desire into dialogue. You stop demanding outcomes and start discovering meaning. 5. The anima and animus, inner opposites that shape desire. Jung described the anima, the inner feminine in a man, and the animus, the inner masculine in a woman, as mediators between the conscious mind and the unconscious. These archetypes deeply influence what and whom we desire. A man who has not integrated his anima may chase romantic partners who embody the qualities he represses: emotional sensitivity, intuition, or creativity. He confuses his inner feminine ideal with real women. Likewise, a woman disconnected from her animus may seek partners who express strength or confidence she has yet to claim within herself. This is why relationships so often become arenas of projection. We fall in love with our own lost qualities reflected in another person. We want them not because of who they are, but because they symbolize our path to inner wholeness. Recognizing this pattern allows you to reclaim your projections. You stop chasing external validation of your missing parts and start cultivating them within. Then your desires become authentic, not compensatory. 6. The symbolic nature of desire. In Jungian psychology, desire is not a problem to be eliminated. It's a symbol pointing toward the self. Every desire has two layers, the literal and the symbolic. The literal layer says, I want this object or experience. The symbolic layer says, I'm trying to integrate this part of myself. When you crave status, you might be seeking inner authority. When you crave love, you might be yearning for inner unity. When you crave adventure, you might be trying to awaken dormant creativity. If you stay on the surface, desire becomes addiction, the endless cycle of wanting and never having enough. But if you interpret desire symbolically, it becomes guidance, a compass directing you toward growth and individuation. This is what makes Jung's perspective radically different from most manifestation ideologies. He doesn't say you can have whatever you want through positive thinking. He says you can become conscious of what you truly need, and in doing so you align your outer life with inner truth. 7. The reconciliation between desire and meaning. You cannot get what you want until you understand why you want it. and often the why isn't what your ego tells you. Jung's psychology invites you to dig beneath ambition to find meaning. When meaning becomes the driver, your goals transform from possessions into expressions of the soul. To Jung, the process of knowing what you want is inseparable from the process of knowing who you are. The two evolve together. As you integrate your shadow, recognize your projections, and honor your inner voice, your desires purify. They shift from grasping to giving, from fear to authenticity. You no longer chase what sparkles, you pursue what resonates. You no longer want to get, you want to become. Part 2. The law of inner alignment. When the conscious and unconscious agree. Carl Jung believed that the greatest tragedy of the human condition is internal division. Most people live with a split psyche, one part saying, "I want this," and another whispering, "I'm not worthy of it." This contradiction is why people chase goals endlessly and never feel fulfilled. The outer effort collapses because the inner world resists it. Jung's solution was not to push harder, but to align the conscious and the unconscious to make them speak the same language. When this alignment happens, you don't need to force outcomes. Life begins to unfold with synchronicity. Jung described synchronicity as meaningful coincidence, events that appear random but actually mirror an inner state of readiness. You attract not what you want consciously, but what your entire being vibrates with subconsciously. 1. The inner conflict. When the mind and the soul disagree, every human being carries within them two opposing voices. The conscious mind says, "I want success, love, peace." The unconscious responds, "You don't deserve it," or "You're not ready for it." These two voices create friction, draining psychic energy and scattering focus. In Jungian psychology, this dissonance is the root of neurosis, not madness, but a lack of inner unity. Jung wrote, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." That means when we avoid the pain of inner integration, life manifests outer struggles instead. You can see this in someone who works tirelessly to prove their worth, because they can't face the buried belief that they are unworthy. Their unconscious sabotages their conscious goals, not out of cruelty but as a call for healing. Until the conscious mind and unconscious agree on a single purpose, the psyche behaves like a house divided. The conscious wants expansion. The unconscious demands safety. The conscious says, "Let's grow," while the unconscious says growth means danger. Alignment begins the moment you stop judging either side and start listening to both. 2. The role of awareness, making the unconscious. Conscious Jung's central idea was that wholeness, not perfection, is the goal of life. To achieve this, you must illuminate what's hidden. Awareness transforms conflict into cooperation. The unconscious is not the enemy. It's simply the part of you that holds unprocessed memory, emotion, and instinct. When you bring awareness to those hidden parts, you reclaim their energy. Imagine your psyche as a government. The conscious ego is the elected leader making day-to-day decisions. But the unconscious is the unseen infrastructure, the culture, history, and institutions that shape every law and reaction. If the leader ignores the system underneath, chaos ensues. But if the leader learns the language of the system, policy aligns with reality. In the same way, when your conscious mind learns to dialogue with the unconscious, your energy stops leaking into resistance and starts flowing toward creation. Jung's method of active imagination, where you visualize and converse with unconscious figures or symbols, was designed for this very purpose. Through these inner dialogues, you begin to understand why parts of you resist certain goals. Sometimes that resistance carries wisdom. Maybe your unconscious knows the path you're chasing isn't truly yours. 3. The energetics of alignment, libido, and psychic energy. In Jung's framework, libido isn't just sexual energy, it's the raw life force that powers everything you do. When the conscious and unconscious are in conflict, that energy becomes fragmented. Anxiety, depression, or fatigue are the results of inner energy turning against itself. But when they align, that same energy becomes creative fire. To get whatever you want, you need your psychic energy unified behind the desire. That means your emotions, beliefs, and imagination must not contradict your conscious goal. Jung believed that transformation begins not through discipline but through integration, bringing the scattered parts of the psyche into coherence. For example, someone who consciously wants success but unconsciously fears exposure will experience stagnation. Their energy divides, half drives them forward, half pulls them back. The solution isn't motivational slogans. It's dialogue asking, what does the fearful part of me need to feel safe? When you meet your inner resistance with understanding instead of suppression, it dissolves. The moment the unconscious feels seen, it stops fighting and starts cooperating. Energy once trapped in fear becomes available for creation. 4. Synchronicity. The outer mirror of inner harmony. Jung noticed that when people begin to integrate their unconscious life outside them, starts to shift in uncanny ways. They meet the right person at the perfect time. Opportunities arise coincidentally. Obstacles vanish without logical explanation. Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that reveal an alignment between inner and outer reality. From a depth psychological view, the outer world is not separate from the inner one. The psyche and matter are two expressions of the same underlying order. So when your inner world becomes coherent, the outer world reflects that order. People often call this manifestation, but Jung's explanation is deeper. Synchronicity is not about control, it's about resonance. You don't manipulate the universe, you match it. The more authentic you become, the more reality bends to mirror that authenticity. It's like tuning two strings to the same pitch. When one vibrates, the other begins to sing. That's how the law of inner alignment works. When your vibration matches your truth, life hums in harmony with your being. 5. Archetypal alignment. Living. According to inner myth, Jung believed every individual lives out an inner myth, a symbolic story that shapes their destiny. This myth is not chosen, it's discovered. When your conscious goals harmonize with your archetypal pattern, your path unfolds with natural power. But when you fight against your myth, you experience frustration and breakdown. For instance, someone with a healer archetype who tries to live as a ruthless business person will feel drained and disconnected. Another with a warrior archetype who avoids confrontation will feel perpetually anxious. The unconscious tries to correct the imbalance by creating situations that push the person back toward their true path. To align consciously with your inner myth, you must interpret your life symbolically. Every event, loss, or longing carries mythic significance. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What story is my soul trying to tell through this?" Once your actions align with your inner archetype, effort becomes flow. You stop chasing and start unfolding. The unconscious no longer needs to sabotage you because you've finally agreed to live your true narrative. 6. The language of emotion. The compass of the unconscious. Emotions are the voice of the unconscious. They reveal alignment or disalignment instantly. When your conscious choice resonates with your deeper truth, emotion feels like expansion, calm, excitement, or peace. When it contradicts your unconscious values, emotion feels like contraction, anxiety, guilt, or dullness. People often misread emotions as random or inconvenient, but in Jungian work, feelings are data. They are feedback from the psyche. If you constantly feel resistance toward a goal, that resistance isn't laziness, it's information. The unconscious may be signaling that the goal belongs to the ego's vanity, not the self's calling. Emotional intelligence in Jung's sense isn't about suppressing feelings or indulging them, it's about decoding them. Ask yourself, what is this emotion trying to reveal about my alignment? When you honor the message instead of denying it, emotions transform into guidance. Alignment doesn't feel like a dopamine rush, it feels like inner silence. You sense that your actions are not forced. That calm certainty is the psyche's green light. 7. The dangers of willpower without integration. Our culture glorifies willpower, grind harder, push through, never quit. But Jung warned that excessive willpower can sever the ego from the unconscious. A person who forces their way through life may achieve external success, but will pay with inner emptiness. They gain control but lose connection. When you rely solely on conscious effort, you neglect the wisdom of the unconscious. You burn energy fighting your own depths. Jung compared this to a man rowing upstream, while the river itself tries to guide him downstream toward his natural direction. True mastery, Jung said, comes from surrender not to weakness but to the intelligence of the self. When you trust the unconscious, you allow it to participate in creation. That's when inspiration, intuition, and synchronicity combine to carry you further than willpower ever could. You don't have to force what's meant for you. When your conscious intent and unconscious pattern align, the path opens. Obstacles become teachers instead of enemies. The psyche no longer needs to block your progress to get your attention. 8. The role of inner dialogue negotiating with the unconscious. One of Jung's greatest contributions was the practice of active imagination, a dialogue between ego and unconscious imagery. In this process, you visualize inner figures, perhaps an old man, a child, or an animal, and let them speak freely. These figures represent autonomous parts of the psyche, often carrying messages about what your unconscious needs. For example, a recurring dream figure warning you to slow down might represent the part of you that values rest and reflection. Ignoring it leads to burnout or illness. Listening to it restores balance. In Jung's view, every inner figure deserves a seat at the table. The conscious mind must become a mediator between them, not a dictator. The more you practice this inner democracy, the more your decisions reflect the whole of who you are. And when the whole psyche agrees on a direction, your power multiplies. 9. How the self orchestrates desire. The self in Jung's model is not just the center, but the totality of the psyche, both conscious and unconscious. It's the inner organizing principle that seeks wholeness. The self uses desire as a compass to guide the ego toward integration. When you align with the self, your desires shift. They stop being about possession and start being about expression. You no longer want things to fill a void. You want to create from fullness. You stop asking, "What can I get?" and start asking, "What am I meant to embody?" That's why alignment feels effortless, because the self never fights itself. It operates through intuition, coincidence, and peace. When you obey that rhythm, your outer world becomes an extension of your inner harmony. 10. Practical signs of inner alignment. You can recognize alignment by its subtle but unmistakable qualities. You feel internally quiet even when you're taking action. You don't chase validation. You follow inner necessity. Opportunities arise naturally instead of being forced. People who share your values start appearing in your life. Challenges still happen, but they feel purposeful, not punishing. Disalignment feels like constant friction, overthinking, self-sabotage, and exhaustion. The ego is pulling one way while the unconscious pulls another. Real power begins the moment they move in the same direction. 11. Realignment through suffering. Ironically, the moments when your life falls apart are often invitations to realign. Jung wrote that crises are the psyche's way of forcing consciousness to grow. When the outer structure breaks, the unconscious floods in dreams. Intensify emotions. Surface meaning demands attention. Instead of resisting these periods, see them as recalibration. The psyche is trying to synchronize you with a deeper truth. Many people only achieve alignment after losing what their ego thought it wanted. That loss clears the way for authenticity. The unconscious is merciful in strange ways. It will take away what your soul doesn't need, even if your ego screams in protest. 12. Inner alignment and creativity. When the conscious and unconscious cooperate, creativity explodes. Artists, inventors, and mystics often describe their breakthroughs as moments when something beyond them took over. That's the self moving through them. Jung said that in such states one doesn't create but participates in creation. This is why inspiration feels sacred. It's a signal that your inner alignment is momentarily perfect. The ego becomes a channel for something larger. And the same applies to everyday creation, building a business, nurturing a family, or healing others. Alignment turns effort into artistry. 13. The sacred paradox: to align, you must let go. There is one paradox Jung always returned: to what you try to control, you lose. What you surrender to transforms. To align with your unconscious, you must release the ego's obsession with certainty. Control is fear disguised as order. The more you demand guarantees, the more rigid your psyche becomes. But the unconscious thrives on flow symbol and ambiguity. You can't negotiate with it through logic, only through sincerity. When you stop clinging to outcomes and start trusting your process, alignment becomes your natural state. The conscious mind bows to the deeper intelligence of the self. You no longer demand that life give you what you want. You become the person who naturally attracts it. Part 3. Shadow integration, the hidden block to getting what you want. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This single sentence explains why so many people fail to get what they want. The barrier isn't outside them, it's within. The obstacle is not fate, not lack of talent, not bad luck. It is the shadow, the disowned parts of the psyche that quietly sabotage everything you try to achieve. 1. The birth of the shadow. From childhood, you learned what was acceptable and what was forbidden. Every time you expressed something that earned love, obedience, kindness, intelligence, you reinforced that behavior. Every time you expressed something that triggered disapproval, anger, envy, sadness, selfishness, you buried it. Over time, everything the world told you was bad or too much or not enough got exiled into your unconscious. Jung called this the shadow. It contains everything you reject about yourself, your insecurities, impulses, fears, and even untapped talents. The tragedy is that the shadow doesn't disappear. It only hides, influencing your choices from the dark. You think you're making free decisions, but in reality you're being pulled by an invisible gravity, the desire to compensate for what you've repressed. For example, someone who represses their anger may appear calm and polite, but their life is filled with people who disrespect them. A person who hides their vulnerability may attract relationships that constantly humiliate them. The psyche will recreate outer experiences that mirror the inner imbalance, until you face what you've buried. 2. The shadow as the enemy of desire. The shadow doesn't oppose your conscious desires out of malice. It does so to protect you. It's built from old emotional memories that equate visibility with danger, success with shame, love with loss. The shadow's logic is primitive. If being powerful once caused pain, then I'll never let you be powerful again. So when you consciously decide, I want to succeed, your unconscious counteracts, whispering, no, remember what happened last time. It's not sabotage in the malicious sense. It's protection based on outdated programming. This inner contradiction consumes psychic energy. You can spend years pushing forward consciously while being pulled backward unconsciously. The result is exhaustion, self-sabotage, or a repeating cycle of almost making it. Shadow work begins when you recognize this pattern, when you stop blaming external conditions and start asking, what part of me doesn't feel safe having what I want? 3. Projection, seeing your shadow in others. Jung discovered that the easiest way to see your shadow is to notice what triggers you in others. The qualities you condemn most strongly often reveal what you secretly repress. If arrogance disgusts you, perhaps you've denied your own confidence. If neediness irritates you, maybe you've buried your capacity to ask for help. Projection is how the psyche keeps the shadow hidden. It externalizes inner conflict. Instead of saying, I am jealous, you say, they're so fake. Instead of admitting I crave power, you criticize those who have it. The unconscious mind prefers judgment over self-awareness because it maintains the illusion of purity. But projection has a cost. It keeps you trapped in the same dynamics. The world becomes a mirror reflecting your unacknowledged material. Every time you meet someone who provokes you, life is offering a psychological mirror. This is you. See it, integrate it, reclaim it. The paradox is that the people you dislike the most are often the ones your soul sent to awaken you. 4. The golden shadow, the light you've repressed. Not all shadow material is dark. Some of it is golden. Jung said that the shadow also contains your disowned potential, the traits too powerful, too brilliant, or too sacred for your early environment to handle. If your family discouraged self-expression, you might have buried your creativity. If love felt conditional, you might have suppressed your emotional depth. This is what Jung called the gold in the shadow. You may project not only your shame, but also your greatness onto others. That's why you admire certain people, almost irrationally, artists, leaders, or lovers who seem to embody what you secretly long to express. The task isn't to idolize them, but to realize, they're showing me my own hidden possibility. The moment you reclaim that projection, you retrieve psychic energy. What was once outside you becomes part of you. Integration releases energy that was frozen in repression. When you integrate, your golden shadow desire becomes creative instead of compensatory. You no longer chase people or situations to reflect your worth, you embody it. 5. The cycle of self-sabotage. Every time you move towards something you want, success, intimacy, freedom, the shadow surfaces to test your readiness. It does this by evoking fear, procrastination, doubt, or guilt. Most people interpret this as failure, but Jung saw it as the psyche's self-regulating mechanism. If the unconscious still contains unresolved pain around a goal, it will block you until you're psychologically prepared to handle it. For instance, if you desire abundance but unconsciously associate wealth with corruption, you will unconsciously repel opportunities. The psyche always prioritizes safety over satisfaction. Until the shadow feels safe, it won't allow expansion. Integration requires creating safety inside, teaching your nervous system and unconscious that it's no longer dangerous to shine, to love, or to be seen. You cannot bully your shadow into obedience. You must educate it with compassion. Healing begins not with control, but with conversation. 6. Integrating the shadow. The Jungian process. Jung proposed a radical method for shadow integration, conscious dialogue. Instead of denying the unwanted part, you personify it, give it voice, name, and form. You might imagine sitting across from your anger, fear, or envy and letting it speak freely. This is not imagination in the childish sense. It's active imagination, a psychological ritual where the unconscious expresses itself symbolically. You might be surprised at what these inner figures say. Anger might confess, "I've been protecting you from being hurt again." Fear might whisper, "I'm scared you'll repeat the same mistake." The goal isn't to eliminate these parts, but to integrate them, to acknowledge their original purpose and update their strategy. When you meet your inner enemies with understanding, they transform into allies. Integration doesn't mean acting out destructive impulses. It means accepting their existence so they no longer control you from the dark. Awareness disarms them, compassion integrates them, and integration restores psychic wholeness, the state where energy flows freely instead of fighting itself. 7. The shadow and the law of attraction. Jung's psychology offers a profound correction to the popular law of attraction. You don't attract what you think you want. You attract what your unconscious believes is true. The shadow therefore becomes the hidden magnet shaping your external life. If your shadow believes love equals betrayal, you will unconsciously select partners who prove that belief. If your shadow associates success with isolation, you'll sabotage promotions or opportunities to remain connected. Manifestation fails when people try to change external circumstances without integrating internal contradictions. You can visualize abundance all day, but if your unconscious believes it's unsafe, the psyche will reject it. Real manifestation from a Jungian lens is integration. The moment your shadow no longer resists your desire, the outer world adjusts effortlessly. The resistance wasn't in the universe, it was in you. 8. Emotional triggers as pathways to integration. Every emotional trigger is a shadow portal. The stronger your emotional reaction to something, the more of yourself is hidden behind it. Triggers are not problems to be avoided. They are messages from the unconscious saying, "Look here, this is where you're split." When someone's behavior enrages, you ask yourself, what part of me feels threatened? When jealousy arises, ask, what quality in them have I disowned in myself? Each time you make the unconscious conscious, you reclaim energy. Instead of losing power to emotional reactivity, you gain awareness. Over time, your triggers become teachers. Integration turns emotional chaos into insight. What once hurt you becomes what heals you. 9. The shadow in relationships. Relationships are the most fertile ground for shadow work. Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." When two people connect, their conscious selves interact politely, but their shadows meet in silence. Attraction and conflict both arise from these invisible interactions. You fall in love with someone who reflects your golden shadow and fight with them when they mirror your dark one. That's why relationships feel so intoxicating and painful. They awaken every hidden aspect of you. Love is not a fairy tale, it's a psychological alchemy. Each argument, disappointment, or betrayal reveals what part of you needs integration. The purpose of relationships isn't to make you happy, it's to make you whole. When you stop projecting your shadow onto your partner and start owning it, intimacy deepens. You no longer demand the other to fix what you refuse to face. Love becomes a conscious union instead of a battle of wounds. 10. The collective shadow. Jung extended this idea beyond the individual. He warned that entire societies have shadows, collective emotions, prejudices, and moral blind spots that people deny collectively. The horrors of war, racism, greed, and mass hysteria, he said, arise when collective shadows are projected onto the other. Nations demonize outsiders to avoid facing their own darkness. Jung believed that global peace would only emerge when individuals integrated their personal shadows, because societies are made of people and the world reflects our collective psyche. In this sense, personal shadow work is not selfish, it's sacred. Every person who integrates their darkness contributes to the healing of the collective unconscious. The more you own your darkness, the less you need to project it into the world. And as projection decreases, compassion increases. 11. The resistance to shadow work. The shadow resists exposure because it fears annihilation. Facing your darkness means facing shame, guilt, and grief. It feels like dying because a false self must dissolve. Jung compared this process to alchemy, turning base metal into gold through fire. Shadow work is emotionally intense because it destroys illusion. The ego's pride, its good person identity, must be humbled. But only through that humility can authenticity emerge. People often avoid this work by spiritual bypassing, using positivity, religion, or philosophy to avoid feeling pain. Jung warned that light without shadow becomes blindness. The goal is not to escape darkness, but to walk through it consciously. Those who dare to confront their shadow experience an unexpected reward: freedom. They no longer fear their own thoughts or emotions. They become whole. 12. The liberation of shadow integration. Once you integrate, your shadow desire transforms. You no longer chase what validates your wounds. You pursue what expresses your wholeness. You stop wanting to get something and start wanting to give something. This is psychological maturity, when the unconscious no longer needs to create external drama to get your attention. Life becomes calmer, simpler, more aligned. Your desires become clear because they're not reactions to pain, they're expressions of purpose. You want peace not because you're tired of chaos, but because you've made peace with chaos within. You want success not to prove worth, but to serve meaning. The shadow, once integrated, becomes your ally. The same anger that once destroyed now fuels courage. The same envy that once poisoned now inspires creation. What was once darkness becomes drive. 13. Living without repression. After shadow integration, you no longer need to repress emotions. Anger, sadness, and fear still arise, but they no longer dominate. You let them pass through you without shame. You trust your inner system. Repression steals energy. Expression releases it. Jung said that psychological energy must flow like water. If it's blocked, it stagnates and breeds pathology. Integration restores that flow. A whole person is not one who never feels conflict, but one who allows it to move through awareness without distortion. This state creates authentic magnetism. You attract people and opportunities that resonate with your integrated vibration. You become magnetic not because you manipulate energy, but because you've become honest with it. 14. The shadow as the gatekeeper to power. Every dream you chase requires permission from the shadow. It guards the doorway between limitation and power. The moment you confront what you fear most, rejection, failure, vulnerability, you reclaim the energy locked behind it. That's why great breakthroughs often follow breakdowns. When your outer world collapses, your shadow steps forward. If you have the courage to face it, you access the very strength you were seeking all along. In Jung's alchemical terms, nigredo, the blackening, is the first stage of transformation. It's when everything familiar disintegrates. The ego panics, but the soul rejoices. The ashes of the false self become the soil of rebirth. You cannot skip this stage. To integrate the shadow is to earn the right to your power. 15. The wholeness beyond duality. Integration doesn't mean becoming good. It means transcending the split between good and bad, light and dark. Jung said wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. A truly whole person is paradoxical. They are strong and gentle, logical and intuitive, humble and powerful. They are not controlled by opposites. They contain them. When you reach this state, desire itself changes form. You no longer want in order to complete yourself. You desire as an act of creation. You become a vessel through which the unconscious expresses life consciously. This is the ultimate alignment, when shadow and self-darkness and light merge into one current of being. Part 4. Individuation, the final secret to getting what you truly desire. Carl Jung taught that the highest purpose of life is not happiness, wealth, or status. It's individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming the person you were always meant to be, not what your family wanted, not what society shaped, not what your fears allowed, but your true self realized consciously. Most people think getting what they want means controlling life. Jung believed the opposite. It means cooperating with life. Individuation is not about forcing destiny. It's about aligning with it so completely that your desires and life's unfolding become the same movement. 1. The ego's final surrender. The ego is built on control. It measures plans and strategizes. It says, if I just work harder, visualize more, affirm louder, I'll finally get what I want. But Jung observed that life doesn't obey the ego's will. It mirrors the state of the psyche. When your inner world is fragmented, your outer world reflects chaos. When your inner world is integrated, life flows. The final secret is surrender, not giving up, but giving over. Surrender is the moment when the ego stops fighting the unconscious and begins to serve it. You stop saying, I want this no matter what, and start asking, what wants to happen through me? That question changes everything. It transforms will into wisdom. Instead of trying to bend reality, you let reality express itself through you. Jung would say, this is when the self, the totality of your psyche, begins to live consciously. The ego becomes an instrument, not a dictator. It doesn't vanish. It becomes a servant of the soul. 2. The individuation process, uniting opposites. Jung described individuation as the union of opposites. It's the lifelong process of integrating everything you've denied: light and shadow, masculine and feminine instinct, and intellect, matter and spirit, into a single harmonious being. Before individuation, you live in duality. You see yourself as good or bad, strong or weak, successful or failing. After individuation, you see that you are both, and that wholeness exists beyond those labels. When the psyche becomes whole, you no longer need external things to feel complete. You stop chasing desires that compensate for inner fragmentation. You desire only what resonates with your total being, what expresses your authenticity. This is why Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Once you embody your true nature, the world rearranges itself around you. Not because you manipulate it, but because you now vibrate with truth. Reality reflects integrity. 3. The self as the true source of desire. In Jungian depth psychology, the self is not the ego, it is the total divine center of the personality. It's the organizing principle that drives you toward meaning, balance, and transformation. The self uses desire as its language. What you long for deep down is not random, it's your inner being calling you toward wholeness. But when the ego interprets that longing through fear, it distorts it. For example, the self's desire for connection becomes the ego's obsession with validation. The self's desire for creation becomes the ego's hunger for recognition. The self's desire for expansion becomes the ego's addiction to control. Individuation purifies desire by returning it to its source. You begin to feel a different kind of wanting, quiet, luminous, steady. It's no longer a craving, it's a calling. It doesn't demand, it invites. When you act from this level, everything you pursue feels natural, not forced. What you seek begins to seek you because both arise from the same origin, the self expressing itself through experience. 4. The symbolic path of transformation. Individuation unfolds symbolically, not linearly. The psyche speaks through images, dreams, and synchronicities, not checklists. Jung said that each person's life carries a symbolic myth, and your job is to interpret it consciously. That means every loss, success, heartbreak, or coincidence isn't random, it's a message. The unconscious doesn't care about your external comfort, it cares about your inner evolution. When you misunderstand your desires, life creates tension until you learn their true meaning. For example, losing a job might symbolize the death of a false identity. A breakup might symbolize the need to integrate your inner, opposite your anima, or animus. Even illness can represent a psychic imbalance demanding attention. The ego sees misfortune, the self sees initiation. Individuation transforms life into dialogue between you and the mystery that shaped you. Every experience becomes an archetype unfolding in real time. 5. The death of the false self. Individuation always requires a symbolic death, the death of the false self. Jung often compared it to an alchemical process. The base metal of personality must be burned, melted, and purified to reveal the gold of essence. This death isn't physical, it's psychological. It's the moment when the old identities, the achiever, the pleaser, the victim, the savior, lose their power. These roles protected you once, but they're too small for who you're becoming. As they die, you enter a state Jung called the nigredo, the dark night of the soul. It's a time of confusion, loss, and emptiness. Everything familiar collapses, but this destruction is sacred. The unconscious is dismantling your old story to make space for truth. When you stop resisting that darkness, you discover it's not punishment, it's purification. The false self must fall apart so that your authentic self can emerge, and when it does, life becomes astonishingly clear. You no longer chase what fades, you follow what endures. 6. The rebirth of the integrated self. After the dark night comes albedo, the whitening, the illumination that follows surrender. You begin to sense harmony between your inner and outer worlds. The self and ego, once at war, now collaborate. You no longer act from anxiety or compulsion, you act from presence. Your desires become transparent. You don't need to justify them or defend them. They arise naturally, like the blooming of a flower. This is the stage where people often report synchronicities, sudden clarity, and peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. You might lose interest in superficial goals. Instead of wanting to get you, want to give birth to ideas, art service, or love, You realize that the self expresses itself through creativity. Every genuine creation, from raising a child to writing a poem, is the psyche revealing its divinity. Individuation doesn't make you perfect, it makes you real. And in that reality, life finally feels coherent. 7. Detachment, the paradox of desire fulfillment. Here lies one of Jung's most paradoxical insights. You get what you truly desire only when you stop clinging to it. Detachment doesn't mean apathy, it means trust. When the ego stops demanding outcomes, the unconscious can operate freely. The more you release control, the more life arranges itself around your authentic vibration. This is what spiritual traditions call surrender. But Jung saw it psychologically. When the conscious and unconscious cooperate, reality synchronizes naturally. You stop trying to manifest from scarcity and begin to express from abundance. You realize that the things you once chased are already reflections of what you've become. The need to possess transforms into the joy of participating. In that moment, desire evolves into devotion to living truthfully, to embodying your essence, to letting existence flow through you. 8. The role of synchronicity in individuation. As you integrate, synchronicity becomes your new compass. Coincidences appear not as luck but as guidance. You meet people at perfect timing, read books that answer unspoken questions, encounter symbols that echo your dreams. Jung described synchronicity as an acausal connecting principle, the bridge between inner state and outer event. It's how the universe whispers, "You're aligned." When you're individuating, life seems to conspire with you. The self organizes external circumstances to reflect internal growth. You no longer chase signs, they find you. This is how the unconscious communicates approval, not through words, but through rhythm and resonance. Synchronicity replaces struggle. You no longer push against life, you dance with it. 9. Wholeness as the ultimate manifestation. At the end of individuation, you realize that wholeness was the goal all along. Every desire, wealth, love, peace, recognition was a symbol of that wholeness. You wanted abundance because you longed to feel safe. You wanted love because you longed to unite with your lost parts. You wanted success because you longed to express your potential. Once you embody wholeness, those desires no longer feel separate. You are what you were seeking. And because you've become it, the external reflection naturally appears. This is why enlightened individuals often live in quiet abundance. They don't chase, they radiate. They've transcended the polarity of wanting and having. What remains is serenity, the awareness that nothing essential can ever be taken or added. To get whatever you want, you must become whole enough to realize that nothing is missing. 10. The individuated relationship with the world. An individuated person lives differently. They no longer approach life as a marketplace of desires, but as a dialogue with meaning. They don't ask, "What can I get?" but "What is life asking of me right now?" This shift transforms relationships, work, and creativity. Love becomes sacred partnership rather than emotional bargaining. Work becomes self-expression rather than survival. Even suffering becomes purposeful, a teacher rather than a tormentor. When the self leads, every experience, pleasant or painful, becomes part of a greater design. You no longer separate good from bad experiences. You recognize them as chapters of the same story. Life stops feeling random. It becomes mythic, an unfolding legend of your soul's journey. 11. The archetype of the self and the circle of completion. Jung symbolized the self as a circle, or mandala, a pattern of symmetry representing totality. In dreams, the self often appears as divine figures, radiant light, or circular images. These symbols mark moments of psychic completion when your inner and outer life align in sacred geometry. When you experience this alignment, life feels simple even in complexity. There's an unshakable calm underneath everything you do. You stop oscillating between extremes. You become the still point in the turning world. The circle doesn't mean perfection, it means inclusion. You've accepted everything, your past and future, strength and weakness, humanity and divinity. That acceptance is liberation. You realize that getting what you want was never the goal was remembering who wanted it in the first place. 12. Individuation as sacred service. Jung saw individuation not just as personal evolution, but as service to humanity. Each individuated person contributes light to the collective unconscious. When you become whole, you unconsciously give others permission to do the same. You stop projecting your shadow onto the world, which reduces collective division. You become a psychological lighthouse. Your presence itself becomes healing. People around you begin to awaken simply by being near your coherence. To Jung, this was the real meaning of spirituality, not escaping the world but sanctifying it by living consciously within it. When you embody the self, the divine expresses itself through your humanity. You become the bridge between heaven and earth, spirit and matter, conscious and unconscious. And from that state, whatever you want naturally flows, because what you want is now aligned with what life wants. 13. The quiet power of the individuated soul. The individuated soul no longer seeks recognition. It doesn't need validation, applause, or reassurance. Its authority comes from within. This quiet power is unmistakable, the calm confidence of someone who knows who they are and why they're here. Such a person is not ruled by desire. They're guided by destiny. They live with intensity but not attachment. They care deeply but don't cling. They are fierce in purpose but gentle in presence. They attract effortlessly because they emanate authenticity. The world senses their integrity and responds with trust. That is the ultimate manifestation, when you no longer need to chase life because you are life fully awake and expressed. 14. The final paradox. You already have it. At the end of Jung's psychological journey, the paradox becomes clear. You already have what you've been trying to get. The peace you seek exists in your own acceptance. The love you crave already flows through your capacity to give. The abundance you desire begins with realizing you are already enough. Individuation is not acquiring anything new. It's remembering what was always yours. You don't become more, you become real. When you live from this realization, desire transforms into participation. You no longer ask, "How do I get what I want?" Instead, you live the deeper question, "How can I let life express itself through me fully?" That is the Jungian secret. You don't get what you want by chasing it. You get what you want by becoming who you are. You don't get what you want by fighting the world. You get what you want by aligning with yourself. Jung's secret was simple. The moment your conscious mind, your shadow, and your soul speak the same truth, the universe stops resisting you. You no longer attract by force but by resonance. So stop trying to manifest from fear. Stop trying to fix what isn't broken. You already have everything you need because you already are everything you're searching for. This is the end of wanting. This is the beginning of becoming. If this spoke to your soul, subscribe and let's keep exploring the depths together.